Hello children, in the last lectures we have read about the respiration, different types of respiration, the respiration in various animals and humans. Now we are going to study in detail the mechanism of gaseous exchange. Mechanism of gaseous exchange between tissues and blood. So today we are going to study the mechanism of gaseous exchange. That is, mostly the gaseous exchange occurs between what? Carbon dioxide and oxygen. So what is the mechanism behind that? Actually children, when the air enters into the lungs through nostrils, trachea and bronchi, it enters into the bronchioles. From bronchioles it moves into the thin-walled alveolar sacs or alveoli. So this is the passage of air. I'll just draw it here. Through nostrils, the air will enter into trachea. From trachea, it will enter into bronchi. From bronchi, it enters into bronchioles. From bronchioles, it will move into alveolar sacs, or we can also call them as alveoli. Now, actually, alveoli are rich in blood capillaries. At this place, oxygen from air diffuses into the blood and reaches to all the cells and tissues of the body. This oxygen now diffuses into the cell and is utilized for the oxidation of food and production of energy in mitochondria. Suppose I draw a diagram of alveoli here, a single alveoli, which looks almost like this. So, the gaseous exchange occurs between the alveoli and the outer environment. So, like this, CO2 and carbon dioxide, they get exchanged. As a result of this, carbon dioxide is produced in the cells. Due to this increased concentration of CO2, it diffuses into the blood and is brought back to alveoli and expelled out of the lungs through trachea and nostrils. Now, carbon dioxide from the body, it enters into the alveoli. From alveoli, it will enter into bronchioles. From bronchioles, bronchi. From bronchi, it will enter into trachea, and through nostrils, it will be exhaled out. Now, the next topic is control of respiration. How this respiration is controlled. Respiration control. Actually, respiration is a metabolic process which is controlled by a respiratory center. There is a respiratory center. This respiratory center is situated actually in medulla oblongata, which is a part of brain, and of course pons varoli. Both of these parts are situated where? They are situated in the brain. So the control of respiration is actually the control of respiration is present in the respiratory center. That respiratory center is present in the brain. Now, actually breathing occurs. There are some points regarding the breathing. First point is breathing occurs. It is an involuntary process. Breathing is a involuntary process. Under normal conditions, rate of breathing is 15 to 18 times per minute. This is in the normal condition. 15 to 18 times per minute. Now the total area for gaseous exchange covered through 300 million alveoli. Around 300 million alveoli are present. And the total gaseous exchange area they are providing is 36 to 72 meters square in each lung. Each lung consists of this much of area for the exchange of gases. Now we'll talk about an important point. You might have heard about it, children. That is respiratory quotient. There is a term that is called as a respiratory quotient. Now what is this respiratory quotient? Actually this is what? It is defined as the ratio of the volumes of CO2 liberated upon the volume of oxygen used during respiration. So the volume of CO2 liberated and the volume of oxygen which is used or utilized in the respiration, that ratio is called as a respiratory quotient. Now we are going to talk about some of the respiratory disorders. There are some disorders which occurs due to some troubles in the respiratory tract. These are called as respiratory disorders. Now the first important respiratory disorder is emphysema. Emphysema. Actually, this respiratory disorder occurs due to infection, smoking, etc. It occurs due to obstruction in bronchioles. In emphysema, there is obstruction seen in the bronchioles. The second respiratory disorder, it is most common, that is called as asthma. Actually, in the asthma, air passages are narrowed and lead to obstruction in breathing. Air passages are narrowed. The third respiratory disorder is pneumonia. In pneumonia, the lymph and the mucus accumulate in alveoli and bronchioles. There is accumulation of lymph and mucus in alveoli and bronchioles. It occurs due to viral and bacterial infection. The fourth type of respiratory disorder can be called as a bronchitis. In the bronchitis, there is swelling seen in the living membrane of respiratory tract. There is a swelling in the respiratory tract. Another respiratory disorder, it is called as a TB or tuberculosis. In tuberculosis, there is a bacterial infection seen in lungs. Bacterial infection seen in the lungs. The last important disease is pleurisy. And in pleurisy, there is an inflammation of lung membrane. Inflammation seen in lung membrane, and that membrane is called as pleura. So these were the various respiratory disorders due to which there is malfunctioning of respiratory tract. Now, there is a term that is called as a fermentation. Let me talk about fermentation. You might have heard this term earlier also. Fermentation. Now, fermentation is what? There is slow decomposition of organic matter into simpler substances in the presence of enzymes, that is known as fermentation. So this is what actually, this is the slow decomposition. It is a slow decomposition of what? Of organic matter. Organic matter. So now we are going to we'll talk about this fermentation in detail. Later on, let me tell you some of the points of differences between the aerobic and the anaerobic respiration. There are two types of respiration that we have already discussed. Let me discuss the points of differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. These are the two main types of respiration found. Now, the first important difference is the aerobic respiration. It occurs in all living cells. Occurs in all cells, all living cells in fact, living cells. On the other hand, anaerobic respiration, it occurs in bacteria, fungi, fleshy fruits, mussels, etc. Now, second point of difference is it requires oxygen. Oxygen is required here. It does not require. Oxygen is not required. Third point of difference is the end products in case of aerobic respiration are carbon dioxide and water. These are released. On the other hand, the end products in the anaerobic respiration are, they are either alcohol plus CO2 or it can be lactic acid. The fourth point of difference between these is the oxidation of one molecule of glucose produces, there are 38 ATP energy produced. On the other hand, in case of anaerobic respiration, only 2 ATP is produced. The fifth point of difference is all the reactions except the reaction of glycolysis takes place inside mitochondria, and here all the reactions takes place in cytoplasm. So we can write like this: it occurs in cytoplasm and mitochondria. On the other hand, anaerobic respiration, all the processes they take part in, the site of reaction is what? Cytoplasm only. It is only cytoplasm. Mitochondria is not at all involved. The sixth point of difference is high amount of energy is released that we have talked about. Now it is a non-toxic process. It is non-toxic to higher organisms. On the other hand, this is toxic to higher organisms. Now, as we have differentiated between the two major types of respiration, that was aerobic and anaerobic respiration, let me tell you some points of differences between the respiration and photosynthesis. As I told you, respiration and photosynthesis both can be called as a metabolic processes. So there are few points of differences in these two also, respiration and photosynthesis. In respiration, it can be called as a catabolic process. On the other hand, photosynthesis is an anabolic process. Here the carbohydrates are oxidized. Carbohydrates oxidizes. On the other hand, here there is synthesis of carbohydrates, that is carbohydrates are synthesized. Here energy is liberated. Energy is liberated. On the other hand, here light energy is stored in the form of chemical energy. Here we can say energy is stored. The fourth point of difference is the amount of CO2 in the air increases. Amount of CO2 increases. On the other hand, here the amount of CO2 decreases. The fifth point of difference is here oxidative phosphorylation occurs, or this is called as oxidative phosphorylation. On the other hand, photosynthesis can be called as a photophosphorylation. Photophosphorylation. The last point of difference is oxygen is utilized in respiration and carbon dioxide in H2O form. Okay, now the reaction for this is, reaction looks like this: C6H12O6, which is carbohydrate, plus oxygen. Since it is getting oxidized, it will release what? It will give 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, and energy is released. On the other hand, the equation for photosynthesis, it is just exactly, not exactly, but it is slight reverse of this. Here 6 molecules of carbon dioxide combines with 12 molecules of water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, and it will release products like C6H12O6, which is carbohydrate, and 6 molecules of water are released. So these were the point of differences between the respiration and photosynthesis. Now there are some points of difference. Respiration can also be called as combustion. Actually, it is slightly a process which looks like combustion, but there is a point of difference between these two, and this point of difference is respiration and combustion. Respiration cannot be called as a combustion. The reasons for this are actually respiration can be called as a biological process, and on the other hand combustion can be called as a chemical process. Respiration actually takes place at normal temperature is required, normal temperature. On the other hand, combustion takes place at high temperatures, and respiration, it is a very slow process. On the other hand, combustion is a fast process. So these are the point of differences between the combustion and respiration. Respiration cannot be called as a combustion, and the point of differences are these. Thank you, children.